My name is Hannah Price, and I am 33 years old. I built a quiet little life here in Boulder, Colorado, inside a private gated property tucked into the foothills. It is not flashy. It is not the kind of place people post about online. It is simply mine. I run my wellness coaching business from the small studio attached to the house, helping other women figure out how to build something that actually belongs to them. Most days, I hike the trails behind the gate, answer client emails on my back deck, and feel grateful that I never had to ask anyone for permission to live exactly like this. If you have ever had someone you trusted quietly rewrite your future while smiling at you across a table, I would love for you to drop your thoughts below. I am still learning how to talk about what happened without the old sarcasm creeping in, but I am getting there. It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early October. I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of the old desk in my office, the one I had been meaning to tackle for months. At the very back behind a stack of old client folders, I found the iPhone I had used 5 years ago before I upgraded. The screen was cracked in one corner, and the battery was long dead. On a whim, I plugged it in thinking I might pull a few old photos for nostalgia. Instead, I ended up in the Messages app, tapping the little recover deleted messages option without really thinking about it. What came back made my stomach drop in a way that still feels physical when I remember it. There they were. Dozens of messages between my father Gerald and my brother Keith, stretching back almost 6 years. Messages they had both deleted from their own phones at some point, probably thinking that was the end of it. The first one that made my hands go cold was from my father to Keith. Trust balance is down to almost nothing. Hannah asked again last week about the quarterly statement. I told her the investments are conservative and statements come slow. She bought it for now. Keith's reply came 20 minutes later. Good. Keep it that way. I need another 40 from the account for the new LLC setup. Tell her it is locked in some long-term thing for both of us. She will believe whatever you say if you frame it like you're protecting her future too. I read it 3 times, then I kept scrolling. There were more plans about how to move money without me noticing, jokes between them about how Hannah lives in her little mountain bubble and never checks anything anyway. One particularly bitter exchange where my father wrote, "She thinks that trust is her safety net." It was never going to be enough for both of you anyway. Keith actually needs it to get on his feet. The trust fund my maternal grandparents had set up for Keith and me when we were kids was supposed to be there. It was never advertised as life-changing money, but it was supposed to be real. A few $100,000 split between us eventually, or available as a low-interest loan for starting businesses or buying first homes. My father had been the trustee since their deaths. He had always been vague when I asked for updates over the years, saying the market was tricky and statements took time. I had believed him because believing him was easier than imagining he would lie to my face for half a decade. Sitting at my kitchen island with that cracked old phone in my hands, the sarcastic laugh that came out of me sounded ugly even to my own ears. Of course. My father and my brother had quietly emptied the one thing our grandparents had tried to leave us both, and they had spent years making sure I would not find out until it was convenient for them. Keith's multiple failed businesses. My father's emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Keith needing cash. All of it had come from the trust, and they had deleted the evidence thinking that was enough. I did not cry. I just sat there for a long time, with the phone screen dimming and brightening as it cycled through the recovered thread. The bitterness tasted familiar. It was the same flavor I'd swallowed for years every time my father reminded me that family takes care of its own while somehow never managing to take care of anything that actually helped me. I called my best friend, Julia Coleman, first. She lives 20 minutes away in her own place on the other side of the foothills and has been the only person in my life who never made me feel like I was asking for too much by existing. When she picked up, I did not even say hello properly. I found the messages I said. My voice came out flatter than I expected, the ones they deleted between Dad and Keith about the trust. It is gone, Julia. All of it. They have been moving money out for years and lying to me about it. Julia was quiet for exactly 3 seconds before she said, "Send me screenshots right now. Do not delete anything. I'm coming over after my last client." I spent the next hour taking clear screenshots of every recovered message, labeling them with dates, and saving them to a secure folder. The evidence was brutal in its simplicity. They had not even been particularly clever about it. They had just counted on me being too busy building my own life and too trusting to push harder for statements. Around 2 in the afternoon, my father called. I stared at his name on the screen for a full ring before I answered. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. The rest of me was suddenly very tired of performing the role of the agreeable daughter who never made things difficult. "Hannah," he said, and I could hear the careful tone he used when he was about to lecture me. "I heard from Ruth Ward that you have been asking around about old family accounts. I thought we agreed you would come to me first if you had questions about the trust." Ruth Ward was our next-door neighbour in the gated community, the kind of woman who ran the Homeowners Association Social Committee and knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. I had not asked her anything, which meant my father had already started spreading some version of the story. I did not ask Ruth anything I said. My voice stayed even. "I asked you for years. You told me the money was safe and invested. That was a lie." There was a short pause. Then his tone shifted into the sharper version. I had heard directed at other people, but rarely at me until recently. "You are being dramatic again. That fund was family money. Your brother needed help getting his consulting practice off the ground after the last setback. You have your little coaching business and your nice house up there in the hills. You do not need it the way he did." The sarcasm rose in my throat before I could stop it. "So you and Keith decided together that my share was optional. That is an interesting way to interpret what Grandma and Grandpa left for both of us. Do not twist this into something ugly," my father snapped. "Keith is family. He was struggling. You have always been independent. You should be proud of that, instead of digging up old records like some kind of detective. If you keep pushing this, you are going to make things very uncomfortable for everyone. People in the community are already talking." There it was. The first real threat dressed up as concern. He had already started the narrative that I was the problem, the difficult one, the daughter, who could not let things go. I thought about the screenshots sitting in my secure folder and felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. "I have the messages, Dad," I said quietly, "the deleted ones, the ones where you and Keith planned exactly how to keep me from noticing the balance dropping. I'm not going to pretend I did not see them." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if he had hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was lower and meaner than I had ever heard it. "You always did think you were smarter than everyone else in this family. If you try to use those against us, you will regret it. Your brother has worked hard to rebuild his reputation here. I will not let you drag him through the mud because you are bitter about money that was never really yours to begin with." He ended the call before I could answer. I sat at the kitchen island with the phone still in my hand and watched the afternoon light move across the counter. Outside, the big windows, the mountains, were already turning gold with the beginning of fall. Inside, everything felt smaller and sharper than it had that morning. Julia arrived an hour later with coffee and her laptop. We went through the screenshots together at the dining table. She did not try to soften anything. She just said, "This is theft. Hannah, straight up, you need to call Victor Simmons first thing tomorrow." Victor Simmons was the lawyer I had used when I bought the property and set up the LLC for my coaching business. He was expensive and thorough and had never once made me feel like I was overreacting to protect what I had built. I nodded. The decision felt simple once it was spoken out loud. I was done protecting their version of the story. What I did not know yet was how fast the rest of it would move. My father had already started making calls of his own. By the next morning, Ruth Ward had texted me a carefully worded message about hoping everything is okay with the family, that somehow managed to feel like both a warning and a threat. Two other neighbours I had considered friendly stopped replying to my messages in the community group chat. The social circle I had thought was at least neutral was already choosing sides, and they had not even heard my side yet. I spent that evening printing the screenshots and organising them into a clean timeline for Victor. My hands were steady. My chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the final quiet snapping of something that had been fraying for years. I did not sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Keith's casual texts about how I would believe whatever Dad said. The bitterness was still there, but something else was rising underneath it, something clearer and colder. They had counted on me staying quiet. They had counted on me valuing family peace over the truth. They had counted wrong. The morning after the call with my father, I woke up to 3 new texts from Ruth Ward and a missed call from my mother. Ruth's messages were the careful, neighbourly kind that still managed to feel like a warning shot. The first one read, "Just checking in after what your dad mentioned yesterday. Hope the family stuff isn't too stressful. The HOA social committee is meeting Thursday if you want to join and take your mind off things." The second one was shorter. Some people in the group chat were asking if everything is okay at your place. I told them you were probably just overwhelmed. The third never actually asked a question, but the implication sat there anyway. She had already started spreading the version my father had fed her. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island with the old iPhone and the folder of screenshots open in front of me. Julia had stayed late the night before, helping me organize everything into a clean timeline with dates and context. She left around midnight with a promise to come back after her morning clients. I had not slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice telling me I would regret pushing this. The sarcasm in my own head answered back that I was already regretting the years I'd spent believing him. At 9, I called Victor Simmons. He answered on the second ring, calm and direct the way he always was. When money and family collided, I told him what I had found, sent the screenshots over email while we were on the phone and waited while he read through them. When he came back on the line, his voice had gone even quieter. "This is straightforward trust mismanagement at minimum, Hannah. Possibly more depending on how the transfers were documented. The fact that they deleted the messages after the fact does not help their position. I can send a formal demand letter today requesting a full accounting of the trust from the date your grandparents passed. We should also consider whether this rises to civil theft or breach of fiduciary duty. Your father was the trustee. he had a legal obligation to both you and your brother. I stared at the mountains outside the window while he spoke. The light was sharp and clear, the kind of October morning that usually made me feel steady. Today, it just made everything feel exposed. Do it, I said. Send the letter and copy my brother on it. I want them both to know I'm not going to quietly disappear this time. Victor paused. Your father may try to frame this as you being difficult. He already seems to be working the narrative in your community. Be prepared for that. I am, I said. The bitterness slipped out before I could soften it. He's been preparing that story for years. I'm just finally reading the script out loud. After we hung up, I sat for a long time with my hands wrapped around the coffee mug. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I had spent so many years being the daughter who did not make scenes, who accepted vague answers about the trust because pushing felt selfish. Now the deleted messages sat on my screen, like proof that selfishness had been the family business all along, just not mine. My mother called while I was still sitting there. I let it ring twice before I answered. Phyllis Price had always been the softer one, the one who smoothed things over and reminded everyone that we are still family no matter what. I wondered which version of her I was about to get. Hannah, sweetheart, she said, and her voice already sounded tired. Your father told me you found some old messages. He said you are upset about the trust money. I am not upset, Mom. I am done being lied to. The fund is empty. They moved the money years ago and then deleted the evidence so I would not find out. Keith needed it for his businesses. Dad helped him do it, and then both of them lied to my face every time I asked for an update. There was a long silence on her end. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I knew some money had been moved. Your father told me it was a temporary loan to help Keith. After his second business struggled, he said he would replace it once Keith got back on his feet. I did not know they had emptied it. Completely, I did not know about the messages. The partial truth landed like a stone in my chest. She had known enough to look the other way. She had chosen to believe the version that let her keep the peace. The sarcasm rose again, sharp and tired. So, you knew. They were taking from the trust that was supposed to be for both of us, and you decided not to tell me because it was easier. That is what you were saying. I thought it would be temporary, she said, and I could hear the defensive edge starting to creep in. Keith was your brother. He needed help. Your father said you were doing fine on your own with your coaching business. And that nice house, he said you did not really need the money the way Keith did. I laughed once short. And bitter, right? Because building something from nothing means I automatically forfeit anything my grandparents tried to leave me. That is a convenient rule. Hannah, please do not make this into a war, my mother said. Her voice cracked a little. If you go after them legally, it will destroy what is left of this family. Your father is already so stressed. Keith is trying to rebuild his reputation after the last failure. Can you not just let it go for the sake of peace? The question hung there between us. I thought about all the years I had let things go for the sake of peace, the vague answers, the missing statements, the way my father had always framed my independence as proof that I did not need support while simultaneously using that independence as an excuse to give everything to my brother. I am not the one who destroyed the peace, Mom, I said. My voice stayed level. They did that when they decided my share of the trust was optional and then lied about it for years. I am just done pretending I do not see it. She started to say something else, but I ended the call. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping the old automatic guilt from rising up and swallowing the clarity I had finally found. By mid-afternoon, the social circle I had once considered at least polite was already shifting. Ruth Ward posted in the gated community group chat about the upcoming HOA fall gathering and tagged everyone except me. When I checked the comments later, 2 neighbors I had waved to for years had liked a comment from Ruth that said, "Some people just bring unnecessary drama into the neighborhood. We should focus on the positive this season." It was vague enough to be deniable. It was also clear enough that anyone paying attention would know exactly who she meant. Julia texted me a screenshot of the post. With a single line, "They are choosing sides already. Do not engage yet. Let Victor handle the paper trail." I did not engage. I spent the rest of the day printing everything, backing it up in 3 places, and writing a careful timeline of every conversation I could remember about the trust over the last 6 years. The work kept my hands busy, and my mind from spinning out into the old familiar loop of maybe I am overreacting. The messages on the old phone were not overreacting. They were evidence. My brother Keith called just after 5. I almost did not answer, but something in me wanted to hear what story he would try to sell now that the deleted messages were no longer deleted. "Hannah," he said, and his voice carried the same condescending patience my father used when he wanted me to feel small. "Dad told me you're making a big deal out of some old texts. You know how he is with money, he gets dramatic. The trust was never as much as you thought it was anyway." I let the silence stretch for a moment before I answered. "I have the messages, Keith, the ones you and Dad deleted. The ones where you asked him to move another 40,000 and told him I would believe whatever story he told me. I have screenshots of all of it." There was a pause. When he spoke again, the condescension had cracked into something sharper. "You're really going to do this? Drag the whole family through some legal mess over money that was already gone? You have your business. You have that house. You do not need to punish the rest of us because you are bitter that Dad helped me when I needed it." The bitterness in my own voice surprised even me. "You're right, I do not need the money. What I needed was for my own brother and father to not treat me like an afterthought, who could be lied to indefinitely. You helped him empty the account and then helped him cover it up. That is not family helping family. That is theft with extra steps." "You are being insane," Keith snapped. "If you send that demand letter Dad is talking about, I will make sure everyone in this community knows you are unstable. Ruth already thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Do not make me prove her right." He hung up before I could answer. I sat in the quiet of my kitchen with the phone still in my hand and watched the light fade over the foothills. The gated community that had once felt like a small, safe circle was already turning into something else. Ruth Ward was organizing the fall gathering without me. Neighbors who used to stop and chat were now liking vague posts about drama. My father had started the story. My brother was willing to finish it if I kept pushing. I thought about the demand letter Victor was preparing. I thought about the partial truth my mother had offered and then tried to use as a reason for me to stay silent. I thought about the years I had spent being the quiet, independent daughter who did not make trouble. Then I opened my laptop, found Victor's email from earlier in the day, and hit reply. Send the letter I wrote, copy both of them, and add a request for any and all communications regarding the trust that may have been deleted. I want them to know I am not backing down. I hit send before I could second guess it. Outside, the mountains were turning dark against the sky. Inside the house, felt larger and emptier than it had that morning. The social circle was already choosing sides. My family was already circling the wagons. And for the first time in a very long time, I was not the one standing on the outside, pretending I still belonged inside. The lies were unraveling faster than I had expected. What I did not know yet was how much further they would go before this was over. The demand letter from Victor Simmons arrived at my father's house 2 days later. I knew the moment it landed because my phone started ringing before lunch and did not stop. My father called first, then my brother, then my mother again. I let every call go to voicemail. Julia came over that afternoon with takeout and sat with me while I listened to the messages on speakerphone. My father's voice was tight with controlled rage. "You have made a serious mistake, Hannah. This letter is nothing but harassment. I am giving you one last chance to withdraw it before I involve my own attorneys. You are embarrassing this entire family." Keith's message was shorter and uglier. "You really want to burn every bridge? Fine. See how long your little coaching business lasts when everyone in Boulder knows you are crazy enough to sue your own father over money that was never yours." My mother's voicemail was the one that hurt the most, even though I had expected it. She sounded like she had been crying. "Please, Hannah, your father is beside himself. Keith is terrified. This will ruin what little reputation he has left. We can work something out privately if you just stop this legal nonsense. Family does not do this to each other." I deleted all 3 messages without replying. The old automatic guilt tried to rise, but it had nowhere to land anymore. I had the screenshots, I had the timeline, I had Victor on my side. The version of me who used to twist herself into knots to keep the peace was already gone. 2 days after the letter went out, my father showed up at the gate of my property unannounced. Ruth Ward must have told him I was home. He stood there in his expensive coat, pressing the intercom button over and over until I finally answered. "I am not letting you in," I said through the speaker. My voice was steady. "If you have something to say, say it here." He looked up at the camera, his face flushed. "You are going to destroy your brother's life over this? Is that what you want? To see Keith lose everything because you could not let go of some old grudge?" I pressed the button again. "The grudge is not old, Dad. It is current. You and Keith emptied a trust that belonged to both of us and then spent years lying about it. The only thing I'm destroying is the lie." He started to shout something else, but I cut the intercom. Through the security feed, I watched him stand there for another full minute, red-faced and furious, before he finally turned and drove away. The sight of him leaving my property without getting what he wanted felt like the first real breath I had taken in weeks. The social circle finished collapsing the following weekend at the HOA fall gathering Ruth Ward had organized. I had not planned to go, but Julia convinced me it would be better to show up, once be seen as calm and normal, and then let the rumors do their own work. We arrived together just after 7. The moment we walked into the community center, the temperature in the room dropped. Ruth saw me first. She crossed the room with a tight smile and stopped a few feet away, speaking loudly, enough for the people nearby to hear. "Hannah, I did not expect you to come. After everything your father told us about the family situation, I assumed you would want some space." I looked at her for a long moment. The sarcasm that used to stay inside my head slipped out before I could stop it. "My father has been very busy telling stories. It is impressive how fast he can rewrite history when he is the one who got caught." A few people nearby went quiet. Ruth's smile faltered. She recovered quickly and turned to the small group behind her. "Well, some of us prefer to focus on community and positivity instead of airing dirty laundry in public, if you will excuse me." She walked away. 2 other neighbors who had once waved every morning now turned their backs. Leo Hayes, the man who lived 2 houses down and used to borrow my ladder, gave me a quick, uncomfortable nod, and then found somewhere else to stand. The message was clear. The gated community had chosen its side, and it was not mine. I stayed for exactly 20 minutes, long enough to be seen as unbothered, then left with Julia. In the car on the way home, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Once. They are choosing the louder story. That does not make it the true one, I know, I said. And I did. The loss still sat heavy in my chest, but it was a clean kind of heavy. I'd not been kicked out of something real. I'd simply stopped pretending the illusion was worth keeping. The final confrontation happened 3 days later at Victor Simmons' office. My father insisted on a meeting to resolve this like adults. I agreed only because Victor said it would be useful to have everyone in one room with the evidence on the table. Julia came with me and sat beside me the entire time. My mother was there too, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Keith sat next to my father, arms crossed, refusing to meet my eyes. Victor laid out the demand clearly: full accounting of the trust, repayment of the misappropriated funds with interest, formal acknowledgement that my father had breached his duties as trustee. My father tried to bluster his way through it, repeating the same lines about family and temporary loans and how I was overreacting. Keith stayed silent until Victor slid the printed screenshots across the table. Then my brother finally looked at me. His face had gone pale. "You kept those?" he asked, voice low. "I recovered them from an old phone you both thought was long gone," I said. "You were very thorough about deleting them from your own devices, just not thorough enough." The room went quiet. My father looked at the pages like they were something dangerous. My mother's hand came up to cover her mouth. Keith stared at the messages for a long time. When he finally spoke, the words came out rough and uneven. "I told him to delete everything," he said. "After the last transfer, I said if Hannah ever saw the full picture, she would never let it go. I knew it was wrong. I needed the money more than I needed to be a decent brother. I made him promise not to tell you how much was actually gone." My father turned on him so fast, I thought he might hit him. "Keith, shut your mouth." But Keith kept going, like once the dam had cracked, he could not stop the rest from pouring out. He did not want to take as much as we did. I pushed for more. I told him, "You were fine, that you did not need it, that your business was doing well enough without any help from us. I am the one who said we should just keep lying until you stopped asking." The confession sat in the middle of the table, like something no one wanted to touch. My mother started crying quietly. My father looked suddenly old and cornered. I felt nothing sharp or triumphant, just a deep, exhausted clarity. Victor cleared his throat. "Given what has just been stated on record, I suggest we move forward with a settlement discussion rather than full litigation. My client is willing to be reasonable if the accounting and repayment are handled promptly and privately." We reached an agreement that afternoon. My father and brother would repay the missing funds over 18 months with interest. They would sign documents acknowledging the breach of trust. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges or make the story public beyond what was necessary for the legal record. It was not perfect justice. It was the best version of accountability I was going to get without burning years of my life in court. When we walked out of the office, my mother tried one last time. She caught my arm in the hallway. "Can we not find some way to still be a family after this?" I looked at her tired face and felt the old sadness rise, but it did not pull me under. "We were never really a family, Mom. We were a story you all told yourselves about loyalty while you protected the people who took from me. I am done being part of that story. She let go of my arm. I did not look back. In the weeks that followed, the social circle finished its collapse without any help from me. Ruth Ward and the neighbors who had chosen my father's version of events continued to exclude me from community things. I stopped waving, I stopped caring, my business grew. Anyway, clients kept coming. Julia remained the steady presence she had always been. The mountains outside my windows stayed beautiful. The unresolved part is this. Some nights I still feel the ghost of the family I thought I had. Not the real one, the one that actually existed, but the version I had spent years trying to earn. That version is gone. I do not want it back. But the space it left behind still aches, sometimes quiet and stubborn. What I have instead is mine, my house, my business, my peace, my small circle of people who do not require me to lie to myself to stay connected to them. That is enough. I chose myself, I chose the truth, and in the end, the people who had spent years rewriting my future for their own comfort were the ones left holding the consequences. Blood does not mean loyalty. It never did. It just took me 33 years and a cracked old iPhone to stop pretending otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of it resonated with you, drop your thoughts below. I read what you share, and it helps more than you know.